All right, good morning, guys. We're going to go ahead and get started. Before we start our presentation, I'm going to invite the APTO to come up and just speak to students and parents for a brief moment. Welcome.
Thank you. Good morning. I am Kum Sivarajan of Algonquin Parent-Teacher Organization, and I'm also a junior parent this year. So before we dive into more serious college stuff, I would like to very quickly talk to you about the fun part of being the junior, and that is, of course, the prom. So we, APTO, host and sponsor a post-prom party, right, to the juniors. So very super quick, I would like to tell you what has been done in the past, because for this year, we are still working on the logistics. So the kids in the last year and the previous, kids had gone home right after the prom at school, changed and gotten back to school. We then bused the kids to the New England Sports Center in Marlborough to have 5 more hours of fun. A lot of activities, tons of activities, food, and all the kids have loved in the past. But it's not cheap. We pump in a lot of money to make sure our children have good fun, clean fun, I should say. Yep, it is supervised, safe, and the golden underline, it is the substance-free event. To hold it true and make it successful, though, we need a lot of parents, parent volunteers, and parents' help. So look out for more communication when you get them. If you can reach out to us, that would be great. We can look to see how and where we can put you to help. Also, for the donations, the next month, we have set up a fundraiser at Roche's in Westboro. It's a supermarket to raise funds. It's a fundraiser, of course. But this time, it will be students' turn to spread the word, help out, and volunteer. So juniors, start spreading the word about JPPP and the fundraiser coming up next month on actually Good Friday. Also, check us out at the algonquinpto.com or through the main page, homepage, Algonquin homepage. We are there on the community pull-down menu. Lastly, to the parents, thank you from APTO as always, especially to the parents who have been very supportive of APTO. Your help, volunteering, that donation, generous donation, and also your precious time. A lot of help indeed. That's all from me. On to Lisa Conry. Thank you all.
All right, thank you very much. So good morning and welcome. My name is Mrs. Connery. I'm the Director of Guidance here at Algonquin. So we are very, very fortunate to have 3 admissions reps who have taken time out of their busy schedule to come here and share their knowledge about the college admissions process with us. So Mrs. Haberman and Mr. Breglio are going to moderate the event. They're going to ask a series of questions of the admissions counselors to talk about the overall admissions process. At the end, we'll provide you guys with an opportunity to ask questions of the admissions counselors, okay? So now I'm going to ask all of the students. I want your phones put away, please. I want your Chromebooks put away. This is not a time to be doing homework. This is a time to be paying attention because you're going to gather a lot of valuable information that is going to support you in the admissions process. So guys, I'm going to challenge you to represent Algonquin in a positive way in front of our admissions counselors and our wonderful parents, okay? So at this point, I'm going to turn this over to Ms. Haberman and Mr. Breglio, and they will introduce you to our admissions panel. Enjoy the presentation.
Okay, so hello.
Hello, how is everybody? All right, this one works, that does not? Okay, there we go. All right, as Mrs. Connery said, we are really, really fortunate that we have some wonderful admissions reps from different size schools here to really talk about the whole process. We've got Mark Donnelly. Mark is from Northeastern. And we've got John, I'm not going to pronounce your last name.
Chenier.
Shane, and he's from Framingham State. And Ken Sawada from Syracuse. So let's give them a warm welcome.
Okay, so is this working? All right. So we started helping our juniors begin the process of searching for colleges that might be a good fit for them and encouraging them to visit. So John, how important is it to visit the campus, and does this impact the admissions decision?
I would say that the campus visit is really critical, more so on the student and family's end, to make a decision about which schools are going to be the best fit and the best match for a student. We see most of our students kind of come through in their sophomore, junior, and beginning of their senior year, come to check out campus and really get a feel for what the school's all about, what sort of the culture, and kind of really get just sort of a feeling of the campus itself. And that's really important for the student because it's where you're spending the next 4 years of your life, and you want to be in a place that you're going to feel comfortable and feel a part of that community. And so we want to make sure that students have are making the most informed and educated decision about where they're going to be. A lot of times we see students sort of get stuck on ideas because of a school's name or their location or their size without having the idea of what that really means for their educational experience while they're there. We typically don't measure engagement as part of an admissions decision. But we do take a look at, for those students that are sort of we're on the fence about, or that we might be offering a certain kind of scholarship program or something, we do sort of take a peek at how engaged they've been within our office. Have they come to visit campus? Are they invested in coming to our school? So that we can make an appropriate decision about whether or not they're going to be the best fit, and whether or not they're making an informed decision, or whether or not we're just part of their 22 applications this year.
Thank you. So Mark, what type of opportunities do you offer prospective students who visit your campus in order to help them learn more about your school?
Sure. So when students and their families visit Northeastern, it's sort of a two-part process. The first would be an information session given by one of our staff members and a student who works with us in admissions. And we sort of bounce back and forth presenting and taking questions, because we think it's really important for incoming students or prospective students to hear from current students. So that is the first part, and then there is approximately an hour or so campus tour that gives students a sense of, what does the learning space look like, what many of them are more interested in, what is housing like, what is food like, getting a sense of, where we're situated in the city and kind of that balance we have of a campus and being within the city of Boston. And again, I couldn't echo what John said more. The visit is so important to get a sense of the school you're going to. So we try to have a formal session, but we really encourage, especially the students visiting, to talk to students around campus. It doesn't have to be your tour guide. The students are living it. We want you to hear from them.
Thank you. So Ken, beyond just visiting, what opportunities are available to learn more about your school?
Yeah, in addition to visiting, I would say that obviously doing online research. We have a YouTuber named Margot Lee who posts videos online. But some other ways are just through the comfort of your own home or your own school. So representatives come visit your school. So you'll have probably between 80 to 100 representatives from colleges visiting and providing information sessions about their school right here at your school. Your college fair that you host in the fall is a great way to learn more about institutions as well. And some schools may offer interviews, like Syracuse does that. So it's a great way for us to get to know students, but it's a great way for students to get to know us at the same time. And so I live regionally out here in the Boston area, so I usually conduct interviews in like the Westboro area. So there's opportunities that you may find that are available like that.
Thank you. So we tell students that their transcript is the most important aspect of their application. John, why do colleges consider the student's transcript to be the most important?
I would say we typically are viewing that as a really consistent demonstration of a student's academic aptitude. So a student is we're looking at over the course of 3 or 4 years how you've done in school, and the sort of on paper, the sort of perceived level of effort or performance in the classroom to really measure whether or not we feel that you're ready to join our learning community. We want to make sure that we're bringing students in that are going to be successful and that are going to thrive on our campus. And the best demonstration of that is when a student has done that at their high school. That being said, we also really want to see a student's progression throughout their time in school. We know that you are a very different person from when you were 14 when you get to the point of senior year, and that there's often transitions that happen there. There's decisions and life events that might impact that. And so the transcript really gives us the best look, combined with the rest of your application into who you are as a student. So sometimes we see students that might have struggled freshman year, and we see improvement over sophomore, junior, and into senior year. And so that shows that a student has either sort of addressed whatever challenges they might have had, or we also see that students start challenging themselves a little bit later. So they're taking on more academic rigor in those later years, as they sort of figure out the things that they're interested in, the things that they're good at, and start thinking about their future. And so that's why the transcript sort of really demonstrates to us where a student is at when they're entering our campus, and so that we can make sure that we're bringing on students that are really going to be, achieve their goals with us.
So, Mark, to kind of follow up on what John was talking about, what do you consider when looking at the student's transcript?
Sure. One of the things that I'm looking for, excuse me, did a student challenge themselves academically? Did they try to take some AP classes, honors classes, IB classes if your school offers them? One of the things we're looking for is a student who is looking to push themselves academically. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean if you don't have a transcript full of AP classes, you shouldn't be applying to Northeastern. But we do look at that student who's really pushing themselves. We also, when I read applications, I will read one whole school group together. And before I do that, I look at the school's profile, because we try to rate you based on what you did with what was actually offered to you. If your school offers 4 APs and you took 2 of them, and another school offers 30 APs and that student took 15, you both took half of the opportunities you could have. So we try to compare apples to apples and make sure we're comparing you to other students from Algonquin or other schools very similar to Algonquin. And then, of course, as John mentioned, we're looking at your grades, but we're really looking at trends. Are you on an upward trend? Definitely not uncommon for students to have a rough freshman year. It's a big transition. If there is a specific drop we see, we dig deeper to find out what might have been going on. But it is really that consistent measurement over 4 years of what you've achieved.
Thank you. And Ken, at Algonquin, we have what's called a weighted GPA, which we've tried to explain to the students. For you at Syracuse, do you recalculate the student's GPA? And if so, what courses would you consider when recalculating that GPA?
If we see a transcript that is on a 4.0 scale, we won't recalculate it. We'll take what's weighted on the transcript. If a school is not on a 4.0 scale, we will then recalculate it, taking into account the core courses that a student's taking, so not so much the electives, but the core courses, and then we'll weight based on higher level courses that are taken. But keep in mind, schools are different, because I was on a panel recently with UMass Amherst, and so, for example, they're recalculating every single transcript that they receive.
So just sort of a follow-up question on that. When you say you recalculate just using the core classes, we have a huge business kind of curriculum here. would that not be considered the core class? Or
We
what,
would-
what do you consider a core
Yeah, we would
class?
take that into account, I would say, with business, especially with us having a strong business program as well. So especially for our business students, that's something we would definitely take into account.
Okay, so keeping with the idea of students' transcripts, our students will soon be selecting their courses for next year. So John, how important is it to maintain a rigorous schedule in senior year and continue to enroll in core classes?
I would say it's quite important. I mean, students want to maintain an appropriate level of rigor. So we sometimes see students who, are on the lower end of the GPA scale. All of a sudden, senior year, decide to take like 2 APs and 3 honors, and then all of a sudden they're getting like straight Ds, and we're sort of like, this was maybe not an appropriate course selection for this student. But they're trying to demonstrate something by loading up on what is perceived as academic rigor. But each student is really individual. We want to see students certainly challenging themselves, but at an appropriate level. And then for students that have already challenged themselves, we don't want them to sort of all of a sudden senior year be like, I'm good, I got my 3.7, like I'm all set, like I'm just gonna take like, 3 sections of gym and like maybe like this easy, like business, whatever, elective. And because then you're not prepared to enter college. You're not best prepared to position yourself in a classroom on a college campus because you're not, the skill set of the students around you is maybe they've been a little bit more serious going into their senior year. So we support students who are choosing coursework at an appropriate level of rigor, but we do really value when students want to challenge themselves and really get college ready.
So this is for Mark and Ken, and John just touched upon this a little bit, but often students will debate between taking a class where they know they can get an A in or finding a class where it may be a little harder and they may risk getting a lower grade. What are your views on that?
This question actually just came up. My son is in 8th grade and he's going into Brookline High this fall, and he's going through this course selection process. So he asked this exact question. I told him ideally A's and B's with rigor is the most ideal scenario. So I guess challenging yourself, but not at the expense of hurting your GPA is kind of what I did tell him.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing. It's really finding balance. I mean, yes, it is good to have upper level classes, but maybe you want to do it in an academic area you feel stronger. I loved history. I was a history major. I could do AP history. I would not have done AP physics and calculus to save my life. So you want to, if you're going for upper level classes, just, do it thoughtfully. Put yourself in a good position. And I agree completely. Don't take classes that are likely to hurt your GPA.
Thank you. And John, you actually sort of touched on this a little bit in terms of importance of senior year grades, but is it important for students to maintain their grades throughout senior year? There's this fallacy out there that senior year doesn't really count.
Senior year absolutely counts. For those of you that don't know, admissions offices hold the right to rescind their offer of admission to you. So even if you've already been accepted to a school, we have the authority and right to send you a nasty letter in June saying, hey, guess what? You're not coming to our school. Have fun with your gap year. Because the reality is, like, senioritis happens, and we know that, and we understand that. I hate nothing more than signing those letters because it's a student that's really let themselves down. It's a student that was a really serious candidate and we felt was college ready and was going to be a serious and successful student on our campus. And all of a sudden they got 5 or 6 acceptance letters and they're like, I'm good. I don't have to learn any more calculus. Even though I'm going to study physics at this school, I'm done learning for the year. Because then 6 months later, guess what? You're going to be on a campus with students who tried hard all the way through May. So we do expect a final copy of your high school transcript. So once you graduate, you have to send that to us to prove that you've graduated and that you're still meeting our admissions requirements. So we still look at that. And then if we have serious concerns, I get a pile of those letters every year. And it's one of the worst days is signing those letters because I know that I'm limiting a student's choices and that that same student isn't going to have as many options, and we're not going to be able to welcome them to our campus in August.
And on that, Mark, I know as counselors, we deal with this with our seniors, especially going into second semester. Once a student has applied to a school and indicated what their senior year courses are, how important is it for them to complete those courses that they had listed that they were taking?
I think what's more important, as John said, senioritis is a dangerous thing. I taught high school for years. I taught primarily seniors, so I saw it from the high school end as well. And it's very tempting. I mean, you've worked hard for 11 and a half years. It's tempting to take spring off. But we do have our PFG committee, which is poor final grades. And we do a final review to ensure that students really are the students that we admitted. Now, again, I'll hear from students sometimes, you know what, I took this AP Calc, I'm over my head, I'm gonna drop it. That's fine. If it's a reasonable swap, but it is certainly better to try to maintain what you've started. It's just your application process ends on a much higher note that way.
Thank you. And Ken, I know that these both have touched on it, but really overall from Syracuse and from your perspective, what does happen to that admitted student who does not maintain what they had showed you in terms of their grades, particularly, throughout their senior year?
Yeah, as John had mentioned that we can revoke an admission decision at any time. There are a couple things I do want to, just on a side note, that I want to share. The decisions can be revoked not just based on academics, but also based on disciplinary incidents that may occur after you gain admission. Like I've seen, for example, schools have, colleges have Facebook pages for admitted students, and sometimes a student may make poor decisions when contributing to that page. So that's a situation where perhaps we may decide to remove or revoke an admission decision based on that. So just keep in mind that your actions are important all the way through. I kind of think of like the baseball analogy of if you're a baseball or softball player running, if you're hitting a grounder and you're trying to beat it out, you're not stopping at first base, you're running through the bag. So you have to see that first base is that senior year, and you got to run through it. Make sure you're going all the way through as hard as you can through that bag.
So many of our students are beginning to participate in test prep classes and registering for the upcoming SAT and ACT exams. Standardized testing often seems to cause a lot of anxiety for students and parents. So for Mark, are standardized test scores an important factor in evaluating candidates?
It is, it's something a lot of us look at as a necessary evil, in the sense that we have a very nationwide applicant pool, and state to state academics are very, very different. The one consistent data point we have are ACT and SAT tests. That's not to say it's the only thing we look at by any means, but to tell you that they're not a big piece of our consideration would not be honest. We do super score both exams, which means if you think you can do better, please take it again, because I will only ever see your top scores. So that's a really important thing to keep in mind. I won't say a poor test score puts you out of the running, but it's a very competitive candidate pool. And because it is drawn from such a large, diverse area, we are looking pretty heavily at test scores, because that is the consistent piece that we can compare state to state.
So John, we understand that Framingham State is test optional. Can you explain what that means and what other factors are taken into consideration for potential students?
Sure. So at Framingham State, students may apply with a test optional admissions plan. And essentially what that means, with the exception of students applying to a STEM major, so things like bio, physics, pre-engineering, things like that, or students who would like to be considered for our honors program, we do not require the SATs for admission. That being said, we certainly encourage students to send them in if they feel they would contribute to their decision in a positive way. But they are required for our STEM programs. We do have to see a math score for STEM programs, and then the honors program that's part of a statewide requirement. One of the things that that is a little bit different about the public universities in Massachusetts is that we often, most of us, post the state admission standards for the minimum requirements on our websites. So you can see, students can see what the concordance is and what the sliding scale is based on their GPA and the SAT for a minimum requirement. And so we encourage students to sort of view that before they make a decision about whether or not they're applying test optional. So that, because we've seen students that have a lower end GPA, but their SAT is high enough that they would have gained admission had they sent us their SATs. And essentially what it means is that we're making a decision on all the other factors that come into a student's application. So their essays, their letters of recommendation, we take a much closer look at the transcript, and then we look at things like volunteer experience, work experience, extracurriculars, athletics, to sort of see how else they would contribute to our community and what other indicators there might be for their success on our campus.
So Ken, some colleges recommend students take the SAT subject test. Can you explain what a subject test is and how a student will know if a school will consider a subject test as part of the admissions process?
Sure. So subject tests are going to measure specific areas like math or perhaps science. There are schools that are going to be, some schools will take this into consideration, some may not. Syracuse does not. Framingham probably
We do not.
do not either. Okay, so you've got 3 schools up here that do not take into account subject tests. The best way to find out if a school requires them or not is to, well, they'll likely inform you on their website of what they would, so I would check the website, but also you can reach out to the admissions representative for the school that's assigned to Algonquin to find out if that school offers it or not, or requires it or not.
Thank you.
Thank you. So students and parents often have questions about extracurricular activities. How much should they do? What kind do colleges look at? Should they be doing a ton of things? I mean, I'll get questions even from middle school parents about, would it be better for my student to do X versus Y in high school? So in thinking about that and the stress on these kids and their parents of the college admissions process, John, how important are extracurricular activities in the admissions decision?
For a school like ours, where they're not super critical, where they really come into effect is mostly for students that we're considering for our honors program and for certain kinds of scholarships available on our campus. The best advice that I can give to you all and to parents is to really think about what is important to you, what's impactful on your life, what do you enjoy, not necessarily what are you good at, but like really what are the things that you find value in. So we have students, I have a student right now that she works at Target, and her phone thinks that Target is her house because she's there so much. And a part of that is because she needs to be to help support her family, so she works quite a bit. But that kind of work ethic, and she's interested in fashion merchandising, and so she's got really critical and expansive experience in the retail marketplace. And so that kind of experience in a classroom is invaluable. One thing I will say is at this point in time, don't start just joining every club here at Algonquin. We can tell when a student sort of loads up on extracurriculars to try to like pad their resume at the end of their high school, tenure. And so we see all of a sudden when the random student is just like been a certain kind of student for a certain number of years, then all of a sudden they're in the German club. And you're like, that's so weird because you've never taken German. And we can tell, we want students that are really invested in their activities and that have developed a skill set, developed some leadership opportunities as well. And so that might come in the workplace, that might come through volunteering through where you attend your religious services, that might be through your community, that might be here at high school, that might be on an athletic team. But we can tell when a student all of a sudden decides to join the cross-country team senior year, and we're like, all right, yeah, all of a sudden you enjoy running in the woods. Like, that's fascinating. And so we want students that really are good at something, that they enjoy something, and they're invested in it.
Thank you. So Mark, John kind of touch base on the question about part-time work, but often I'll have students who either they're doing part-time work or maybe they have to go home to take care of a younger sibling or something, so they can't do all the other activities or go to that special elite soccer camp or something. How does Northeastern overall look at activities, and what about that student who cannot do a lot? What do you guys want to see?
Sure. You know, we're definitely looking for students who are involved. John hit the nail on the head. You are much better off doing a few things consistently and showing some real commitment to it than, you know, joining every club for a month. That is the worst thing you can do as far as how it looks on an application. We look at your involvement, again, similar to your grades. We look at it based on what was available to you. Having such a large candidate pool, we have students from very, very affluent private schools, very large urban schools. I used to cover northern New Jersey, where, you know, I'd be in Newark public schools that really struggled to get books for all the students, and I would go to a private school an hour away that had valet parking for the students when they arrived. So clearly, different schools can offer different things. As far as jobs go, that is largely seen as a real positive, especially at Northeastern, where the co-op program is such a big part of our model. You know, students who have had jobs either because it was really a necessity to help your families out, or just because, you know, you wanted the work experience. You know, working part-time is a real plus, to be honest. And again, there are students who perhaps have a younger sibling to take care of, or they're expected to work a lot in a family business. Those are all activities. There's no good or bad involvement. You know, if you can't play football because, you know, you have a sibling or a grandparent who lives with you who needs a lot of care, that's not going to work against you. When your only activity is, you know, I love Xbox, that's not a good thing. We're definitely looking for people to be involved in something, but there is no right or wrong activity.
Ken, I am going to go off script a little bit, so this is a question you didn't have. Sorry, guidance counselors, you know me, I go rogue. So my question is, and I get this, we get this a lot. All of a sudden we are writing recommendations for these college summer programs and things like that, or these, you have been nominated to be part of the National Leadership Conference this summer. It's just $10,000 for you to attend. What is your opinion on summer programs, or what students do over the summer? How do you look at those kind of things?
I personally like seeing students who take part in summer programs. So if you have that ability to do that, I would definitely take advantage of it. I mean, Syracuse offers them. Brown has great programs. I'm sure you guys do as well. BU as well. So there's a lot of opportunities close by or even further out. It's a great way to test drive a college, for one, because you could spend a week at that campus. And also you could try a topic that you might be interested in for your career, and then also might find out that that's not the right fit for you. Like you could do like a medical program for a week at a college and then find out, oh, that's not something I really want to do.
Great. Anything else that you want to add from all this?
Yeah, sure. So I have I think a comment on both. So one, if you are quite good at Xbox and you've got a Twitch following that's pretty healthy, that's something we would look at. A lot of schools, we knock video games quite a bit, but many schools are offering esports teams and e-gaming teams, and so that's becoming a competitive place for a lot of students. So certainly if that's something that, yeah, no problem. That being said, take a look around and how many of you play Fortnite, and then think about how many. Yeah, right. So you have to extrapolate that out. There there are thousands of students like you at other schools. So if you've got 1 million followers and you're excelling at it and you've competed, that we consider that the same as Johnny Football. So the other thing is that summer programs, we realize that there are many students who aren't offered this opportunity. They're maybe not privileged enough to have access to that kind of thing. So what we want to see students, we would really value for students over the summer is that they've engaged in some sort of learning and growing opportunity over the summer. We have an exceptional student right now who spent her summer volunteering at a local farm. And it was a community-supported agriculture, and she's now part of our nutrition program, and she's leading the way for us to find sustainable options locally as nutrition for our dining services. So even if it's not an on-campus experience, we look at that summer experience as really an opportunity for students to kind of explore different career paths and gain some experience, earn some money, and so anything that you're doing over the summer that sort of is a meaningful experience, we really value.
And just to clarify, I don't mean to throw shade on gamers. We actually do have a game design major, and we do have varsity esports, so that might not have been a great example. We do realize that is a huge source of growth for people, so I say that lightly, but it is a very good point. I mean, we do have varsity esports and game design, so if I offended the gamers, that really wasn't intentional.
All right, so getting away from video games, but in May, we will be discussing letters of recommendations with our students. So for Ken, could you share your thoughts on how many letters a student should have and who they should be asking to write a letter for them?
It differs from school to school, but for Syracuse, we ask for a counselor rec and then 2 teacher recommendations. Ideally, one of those, if you know like the area of study that you want to go into for your future, it would be good to get someone who's related to that field. Someone to ask, also, I think a myth is that you're going to automatically ask somebody that from a class that you received an A in. But that may not necessarily be the case because someone, like let's say you got a B+ in a class, but you really had to work through the entire year just pushing and persevering through that class and showing that grit. And so that might be a class where your teacher could really speak to your just growth in that class. So that may be a better fit sometimes than automatically asking a teacher that you received kind of an easy A in.
So John or Ken, what's too many letters in your opinion?
More than we ask for. I mean, if we ask for 2, send us 2, because the other 5 are going to end up in a shredder. Like, I'm just speaking frankly. Like my school, we get 8,000 applications a year. There's only so much time to read all those letters. There's only so much information in those letters, and so you're better off getting the exact number that a school is asking for from people that you have a relationship and that you trust and that will write a quality, genuine letter for you. Then, similar to the activities, don't just load up and send us 10 letters from every teacher that you've ever had. We want authentic, genuine letters. So similar to Syracuse, we don't require them, but we do through the Common App. So we typically are looking for a guidance letter and then one from a subject area that you feel that teacher could speak to your skill set.
So Mark, how are the recommendations at Northeastern used during the admissions process?
Sure. One of the things that Northeastern does not offer interviews, just for volume of applications that we get. So, words on the page are what we use to try to get to know you. And that's why what both of the gentlemen said is so important, is ask for recommendations from someone who really knows you and can say something genuine about you. I was a high school teacher. I wrote a lot of letters. I read a lot of letters. And you know when you get the letter that is, insert student's name here. You really want them to, I want to learn who you are. That's why essays are so important, and recommendations are also very similar. I find with counselor recommendations, many times The counselor will give you credit for things that you forgot to give yourselves credit for. Like when I'm looking at activity lists, I'll say, boy, the student wasn't involved in a lot. And then the counselor letter will list the 17 activities they did every year and really kind of saves that student. So, it's important that the person writing the letter really knows you and can really speak, somewhat personally about you as far as their experience, because we use them to get to know who you are as a person because we're unable to offer interviews.
Thank you. And talk about recommendations, but the other big looming thing is the college essay. And in May, we'll be talking to you guys about the essays, but in the past, we found students are often concerned about what is the right thing I should write about. So Ken, you've probably read a lot of essays. What do you feel makes the best kind of college essay?
I think, well, first and foremost is just having the double check of essays and just making sure that they're polished, because we have supplemental essays, which are 2 separate questions that Syracuse asks, and some other institutions may have this as well, in addition to the main essay that the Common App asks for. And I've seen, there was this one that I read where it said, within the essay, it said, in brackets, place name of college here. So it was clearly a template that they were using, but they forgot to replace that part. So I don't mind if students use templates, but just make sure that you're double checking it for any sort of errors. So that's first and foremost. But secondly, we read a ton of applications each day. So we're going through, I would say, 52 plus, 60, 80, 70, yeah, right. A lot of essays per day. So I think I love the essays that are ones where I'm not aware that I'm reading essays. Because I feel like for the most part, I'm aware that I'm an admissions rep reading on my computer screen. The ones that are the best are the ones that just capture my attention. I just totally forget what I'm doing, and I'm completely 100% immersed into the essay. So those are the ones that bring out just emotion, some sort of emotion in me, like either sadness or happiness or even anger, but just something that I get to feel. The topic, I think some people stress about it, but the 2 best essays that I've read this past year one was on ice cream, and then the other was about a unicorn sticker in the student's room. And those are the 2 most memorable ones for me. So the topic itself isn't necessarily the most crucial, I think, part of it.
And then, Mark, students obviously feel quite a bit of pressure around the college essay. Do you have any advice to give them about this?
My advice on essays is to use it to tell me who you are. So you want to pick something that means something to you. And that's different for every person. It could be a challenge that you overcame. It could be a life-changing experience. It could have been, a great learning experience you had. We get a lot about family members and what they've contributed to their lives. It's really my absolute best chance to get to know you. So, yes, you want to, build yourself up and say good things, but the worst thing you can do is say, all right, I'm going to apply to Northeastern. What do I think they want to hear in my essay? Because it will read that way. You really just, and I think you put it so well, the best essay is like, hey, I'm not reading a college essay. This is just really interesting. I'm getting to know this person. That is so important. So really the topic, it doesn't have to be intellectual. It doesn't have to be about one incredible moment in your life or a huge challenge you overcame. It's just something that really is genuine, that tells us about who you are.
And John, Framingham State does not require an essay. So how do you look at an essay that a student has written versus how do you look at it if the student does not submit an essay?
Yeah, so we are a Common App school. We're, I would say for 97% of our applicants, they're submitting an essay as part of the Common App. And so we're typically seeing it from almost every single applicant. And then there's opportunities for an optional supplemental piece. I would say for our test optional candidates that submit an essay, it becomes quite important because it's without the test scores, we're looking for other demonstrated ways that a student can write well, they can tell a story, they have they're telling us more about what they're going to bring to our campus. And so that just gives us some additional insight into when a student joins us. For students that apply, and don't submit an essay, that apply test optional, then you'd better had really, really good grades, because we're only going off your transcript. And so, and we also see the essay as like an investment of time and the importance of the college admissions process. And so we want to know that you're taking this process seriously and that you're investing, time and energy in it, because we know that might be an indicator of how you're going to approach your education when you get to Framingham.
All right, so as juniors, our students are just beginning the college search process, but will soon be introduced to new admissions lingo. So for Ken, can you explain the difference between early action, early decision, regular decision, and rolling admissions?
Sure. I'll talk about early decision and early action first. Early decision is the type that is binding. So if you're applying early decision to a school and you're admitted to that school, you are committing and bound to that institution and attending there. And you then have to withdraw your applications from all other institutions that you've applied to. Okay, so early decision is the binding one. Early action is similar in that you apply earlier and hear back earlier, but it's not binding. Okay, so there is not that commitment that occurs if you're applying early action. Regular decision typically comes a little bit later, so I'll just give you an example for dates specifically for us. Early decision is November 15th for the deadline, and you find out typically in December, January. Regular decision is due January 1st, and then you usually find out in mid to late March. And then I did used to work for a school that was rolling admission, where you could pretty much apply it at any time of the academic year, and then you'd hear back usually for us within about 2 weeks. That was at a prior institution that I worked at. So if you applied in November, you'd hear back 2 weeks after.
Thank you. John, so what type of applicant would you consider to be a candidate for early action admission? What's the advantage of applying early action?
So some of the advantages are really geared around more so for the student. That you're hearing earlier about your acceptances, and you're able to plan for financial aid and sort of go through the financial aid award process a little bit sooner. We encourage any student to apply early action, really because as a state institutions we're bound by certain guidelines for admission. That doesn't mean that every student that applies early action that meets our requirements is going to be admitted early action. What it does mean, though, is that for students that definitely are, and that are a little, that are in consideration for like our honors program and certain merit aid, they get their decision and that award happens sooner. So that gives students and parents a little bit more leverage, a little bit more breathing room as we approach, the deposit deadlines a little bit later in the year. That being said, for students that don't meet our requirements or that we need to sort of delay to regular decision, we might ask for some more information if a student isn't meeting our criteria at the time. But typically, we see probably about a third of our applicant pool applies early action, and they're usually getting their decision by the holiday break in December.
For Mark, what type of applicant would you consider to be a strong candidate for early decision? What's the advantage of applying early decision?
Sure. How much of it is similar to what John just said, but early decision does have some definite things to consider. The most important is that the binding nature of an early decision application. So you really want to think it through that this is absolutely the school you want to attend. Now, obviously, we can't send the Northeastern police to your house and make you come if you are in a binding agreement. But it does set you back with other schools as far as kind of you have to apply to get out of our decision, and there's a fairly long process to go through. The other piece that's very important to consider with the early decision is the financial fit of it. Because if you are admitted to, early decision, you are then really only going to have one financial aid package to consider. So you do want to be mindful of that. And I don't use that to to put anyone off of regular decision, but every year there are people who jump to early decision. There are people who go that route every year saying, well, you know, I'm number 2 in my class, I'm going to get huge scholarships, this won't be a problem. And then decision time comes around and they're very, you know, they are surprised that perhaps they didn't get what they thought they were going to, and now they're in a very difficult position financially, where it's not going to be a good financial fit. So it's important to keep that in mind. As far as advantages to it, there is some competitive advantage. This past year, we had an 18% admit rate, and our ED1 admit rate was about 24%. So there's a little bit of competitive advantage in it, but it's not huge. Some schools will do 50 to 60% of their incoming class early decision. They'll be very upfront about that. And for those schools, it is very important probably to do early decision. We want all of our pools to be legitimate ways to come in. Early decision 1 and 2, regular decision, and early action. You know, we are finishing up our regular decision pool right now, and many, many students are coming into Northeastern through regular decision. So early decision is a great pool for the right fit. It's got to be the right academic fit, and it really has to be the right financial fit.
So Mark, just to follow up on that, if a student applies early decision, is accepted, but they don't receive a financial aid package that's feasible for the family, what can happen?
Well, if a student reaches out and says, you know, this is not going to work, essentially I pass that off to the Dean of Admissions and the Dean of Financial Aid. And they will contact the family, and there is, you know, there is a process they have to go through. And as I said, ultimately, we cannot make you go to Northeastern, nor do we want to try to make you go. But, you know, we do want to make sure that you're deciding not to come is also the right decision. Sometimes people will say, you know, this is just not going to work financially, and they'll sit down with our financial aid leadership, and they'll say, well, it does work. I mean, you could afford it. If you're choosing not to, that's one way to go, but just, you know, you probably could do it. Just keep that in mind. So it's a process to go through. Ultimately, we cannot make you go. And I mean, that's important to understand. But it's a difficult process to do, so we really try to avoid families being in that position.
Thank you. John, what does it mean if a student is deferred as an early applicant?
Usually early action applicants that are deferred to regular decision typically means that they're not meeting the state university minimum requirements in some way. So they either are missing a course, or their GPA isn't high enough, or they might have applied test optional and their GPA is not high enough, or their SATs don't meet our minimums. That's typically the kind of student that we might defer to regular decision. It may also be that there might be something concerning on their transcript, like in their first quarter or in the end of their junior year. And so we might ask for first quarter grades, second quarter grades, to sort of ensure that a student is, you know, continuing to be serious in their study and, you know, doesn't have any gaps that we would be concerned about if they arrived on our campus.
Thank you. Mark, at Northeastern, what does it mean if a student is waitlisted?
It means something different every year, honestly. There are years that we, you know, our yield has been down. Yield is the number of people you admit that choose to attend your university. You know, some years a particular school could use a little buildup, so we'll go to our wait list. There have been, you know, 2 or 3 years in a row at different times where we've never touched it. So it really means something different every year. And we're not even sure where we sit this year exactly what it's going to mean this year. It's really once the dust settles of all the decisions, we then make the determination, are we going to wait list? You know, and if so, how are we going to use it? Is it to bolster one program? Is it just, you know, across the board there are certain needs we're looking for? So it's always a tough one to answer because it really does change every year.
And then Ken, do you have any recommendations for an applicant that is either waitlisted or deferred?
Sure. For the waitlist part of the process, for us, we ask students to click on a link that asks the student if they want to accept their place on the waitlist. Because some students may be like, oh, I'm done, and I don't care to be on it. So we want to kind of differentiate that pool. of students on the wait list. So first, we ask students to click and say, yes, please consider me and continue to consider me on your wait list. And then from there, we just ask students to keep in touch with us on a consistent basis, just because we want to know throughout the waitlist process if you're still interested. So the best advice that we have is just to try to keep connecting with us on a, I would say, weekly basis if you are on the waitlist. But as Mark was saying, it could depend from year to year whether we even go to the waitlist or not. But you want to put yourself in the best position that you can.
Great. And Ken, I want to talk about college majors. And there's a lot of pressure on these guys to already know what they want to do when they grow up and things like that. So sort of this is a twofold question for you, is how important is it from a Syracuse position if a student actually claims a major or not? And are there certain majors in your admissions process that are more competitive than others, and how does that look?
Right, so for Syracuse specifically, we have direct admit programs. So there's 9 different schools and colleges at Syracuse that you would apply into. So it's good for students who have an idea of what they want to do, but at the same time, I do want to stress that a third of our students come in undecided because they're coming in through arts and sciences. And so we ask all of those students to be undeclared and then declare by the start of your sophomore year as to what you want to do. So we're understanding if you're not sure. And just keep in mind too, the average student changes their mind 2.5 times, I think, is the statistic. So and obviously adults are still changing their minds now too. So we definitely are understanding that that we need to be flexible with that too. But also we are a little bit unique in that you are applying directly to certain programs. For us, communications is one of our well-known programs, so it can be a little bit more tough to get into than some of our other majors. Architecture is another example of that.
And Mark, what if a student has applied like for engineering or something and does not get into that major? Does Northeastern, or how do they look at a school to know whether or not they would be admitted to like an undecided, or how does that all work?
Sure. So about 8 or 9 years ago, we really revamped the way we admit students. You have a number of options. You can come in through the what's called NU Explore, which is our undeclared program. You can go into that and then transfer it to any major we offer. You can also come in, you can apply to a specific college, specific major. Engineering students can apply as an engineering undeclared, and they essentially can do just an engineering major Explore program. But essentially the requirements for every single one of our programs now are the same. So, one exception to that, if you're applying to engineering, you had to have had, pre-calc physics and chemistry. But other than those few prereqs, it's the same standard to be admitted into engineering that it is for theater arts or visual arts or English or history. So there's no one school that's harder to get into from that sense. We do have a huge number of major changes every year. And because we do have the same standards for every program, it's a guaranteed major change. Years ago, people said, well, I want to be an engineer, but I'm applying to English because that's easier to get in. We've just avoided that now, so we can say, apply to what you want to. And as far as the question of which programs are more competitive, this is sort of a constant sense of entertainment for our team. We have a pool every year, who's going to be the winning school. And in the last 6 years, 6 different colleges have been the most difficult to get in. It is never consistent. We don't know why. 1 year engineering is far more competitive. 1 year science is far more competitive. We really never know, and we are always surprised. So the best advice is really apply to the program you want. We don't do like second options because there are no programs with lesser requirements. So apply for what you want, and you're either admitted or you're not.
And following up on that, John, what if, in your experience, a student applies for a certain major, and then at the time that they are enrolling wants to change that major? Is that a hard process or not?
It's typically not too difficult. The only time it becomes a challenge is if a student has applied test optional and then wants to switch to a STEM major. That can delay that major change because then we have to have the SAT scores or the ACT scores to offer them admission to that program. What we oftentimes, for students that might be a challenge for, or maybe they didn't take a test, we would offer them admission in the undeclared. They would start, and then at the end of their first semester, they would change, into whatever that major is. Typically, students just need to provide us, in writing their desire to sort of change their major or make any significant change to their enrollment status. So if they are changing from commuter to a resident student, or they want to appeal the decision about entry into our honors program, typically that process is pretty simple. We just need it in writing.
So over the past few years, we've heard that demonstrated interest can be a factor in the admissions process. So for Mark, can you explain what demonstrated interest means and provide some examples?
Absolutely. Demonstrated interest is a very vague term because it means something different at every school, really. What we're looking at for demonstrated interest, a big one might be coming to visit campus, taking a campus tour. But again, our expectations of that are different depending where you're coming from. If you're applying from Algonquin, that's not too heavy a lift to come and take a tour of Northeastern. If you're applying from Seattle, okay, that you might not be able to get here. However, those students can log in and take a virtual tour, and we can see if they've done that. One of the biggest things is to open correspondence from Northeastern. Everything is done by email, and that is all tracked. So if we're reaching out and emailing you, if you're opening the emails, we see some interest. One thing that I'm sure all of us have seen, and I can tell when this is the theory in a school or the belief, emailing us is not necessarily demonstrated interest. If you have a question, by all means, you should reach out to us. But I work with schools where clearly students have been told, email your counselor 3 times a week. Please don't do that. That is not demonstrated interest, and that is not something we track, how many times you reach out with questions. If you have one, by all means, please reach out to me. But don't do it because you think, I'm knocking off all these points for demonstrated interest. That isn't what you want to do. What you do want to do is keep an eye on your email and always be opening and aware of what's happening. That's the interest we're looking for. If it's possible, I definitely recommend coming in to do a tour of campus. That's a great way to demonstrate interest. But that's really how we look at it.
So Ken, does Syracuse track demonstrated interest? And if they do, how?
Syracuse does track demonstrated interest, similar to what Mark was saying. Visiting campus is going to be mark a check with demonstrated interest. Also, things I mentioned earlier with, like when we visit your school, or if we're at your college fair and you stop by our table, those are also signs of demonstrated interest for us. We also do track emails as well, and whether they're opened or not. So that's all kind of plays into the demonstrated interest piece. And then one thing I'll just add is that based on an admissions survey that was done in 2018 by NACAC, 63% of schools either do not care or it's limited for what demonstrated interest is as part of their admissions process. So that still leaves about 40% that do care about it, but just note that you do need to ask schools if they take that into consideration.
And actually, you did mention one great point. When you come to a college fair and we're asking, please fill out this little card, and annoying as that is definitely a piece of demonstrated interest. So I'm glad you pointed that out.
John, after applying, are there follow-up steps that you expect from your applicants?
Yeah, read your email. The most irritating calls that we get in our office are from students and parents, who are like indignant that they didn't receive some piece of information, like, well, we were never told when this was happening, and then I look on the record, I'm like, you were sent 6 emails about orientation, and you probably got a letter in the mail about this. And so that's where, we encourage, and this becomes a challenge for some students if you have like an Algonquin email address, like a student email address, because sometimes, like, don't stop. If that's what you used when you applied, keep using that if you can up until the point that you start school, because we're going to continue communicating with you throughout the spring and the summer, at whatever email address you sent to us. So, I mean, reading the emails is really quite important. Paying attention to anything that the school sends you, especially if it's your chosen school, is going to be pretty critical in making the college process like that much more stress-free. Because we are eager to give you the information that you need to make an informed choice about where you're going to school and what that process looks like. And so we're making the effort to send that information to you. Someone has to craft that email. It has to get, sent to you. There's a team of people doing that. And that's not just to try to like irritate you or try to, make the case. It's really just, we want you to be as informed as possible. So paying attention to any communication that comes from the schools is going to be critical when it comes time to make a decision about where you're going, and then critical to the actual onboarding process and joining our school.
Thank you. And I would expect at this point our parents know, and hopefully our students know, that college is an investment financially. We always get a lot of questions about financial aid. What do they need to do? What about scholarships? Mark, can you sort of tell our students and the parents what you require for financial aid documents? Mm-hmm. Or where they find them?
Sure. So first of all, Northeastern requires both the FAFSA and the CSS profile for any need-based financial aid. We do use both to come up with EPR, which is estimated family contribution. As far as follow-up documentation, our financial aid office will be reaching out. Again, that's another huge reason to look at your emails, because sometimes, I'll hear from a student or a parent that says, we've never received our financial aid offer. We don't know how to make a decision. And I can pull it up and see that, you have been emailed with missing document email several times. And it could be a variety of things depending on the case. Financial aid is much more individualized and case by case than you might think. But the FAFSA and the profile are the starting points that we're going to need.
And Ken, where would students and parents find information about financial aid, and are deadlines different for early and regular decision applicants?
For us, the deadline for financial aid documents do differ between the early decision and regular decision process. For example, as I said earlier, early decision applications are due November 15th, so we ask students to also submit the FAFSA and CSS profile by that date. And then regular decision, same thing, application for admissions due January 1st, FAFSA, CSS profile also due on January 1st for those students applying regular decision. And then any sort of information for that can be found on our website regarding financial aid.
Would it be like the financial aid part of the website? Is that where they would find it?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And John, how can students and parents find out about the scholarships available at the schools they are applying to, and what might it look like for what they need to apply for a scholarship?
There's a variety of ways that schools offer aid to students. There's certain kinds of scholarships and aid that we award at the time of admission that students don't need to apply for separately. That's just part of their aid package when we offer a student admission, and that's common at most schools. And then there's often additional scholarship programs available at schools that are sort of target either specific majors, specific populations of students. So that's again, another reason to read your emails. I'm just sort of thinking of one thing that we just sent out. We have a scholarship specifically for English majors. And so what we did is we identified everybody in our admitted pool and sent them an email saying, you are likely eligible to apply for this scholarship. Here's how you do that. And so sometimes we're communicating that out. We also, a lot of schools offer scholarships that require maybe a separate application. So our Independent Alumni Association at Framingham State offers a variety of funds available to FSU students, mostly from Massachusetts, but that's not directly connected to the admissions decision. So students have to submit a separate application for that. And then the other thing too is, like, I think the best thing that students can do is just start this process really early. That students, there's so much money available outside of the universities for students to apply to, that it really becomes an opportunity for students to find sources of funding outside of the school. So, for instance, I had a student who disclosed 2 years ago that she just woke up an hour earlier every Sunday and just spent that time just researching and applying for scholarships. And at the end of the year, she had like $17,000 and money from the Rotary Club and the Gardening Club and Coca-Cola. And she got a scholarship from duct tape because she made her prom dress out of duct tape. I don't know why, but she got like $5,000 from duct tape for making her prom dress out of duct tape. So like there's funding available outside of the schools that you can search for, but we can't do that for you. We can't, we'll send you what's available at the university and that we think you're eligible for. But that research often is done outside. And I'm sure you guys, in your guidance office have like books and resources and websites to direct them to.
All right, so last section here. For a variety of reasons, some students decide to take a year off between high school and college, or in other words, they take a gap year. So for Mark, what are the benefits of taking a year off, and how does Northeastern view a gap year from the admission standpoint?
Sure. There's a number of reasons a student will choose to take a gap year. Some good, some bad. Some students will say, I'm going to take a gap year. I'm going to travel while I have the opportunity. That's a great thing. Or occasionally, we'll have students who there's an illness involved and they've needed to defer and take a gap year. I guess what we're looking at, if you're taking a gap year, we'd like to see just some idea of why you're doing it. It's up to you. You have a right to do that. But it's good to see that you have a plan for why you're doing it. Students do it for a number of reasons. Travel is probably one of the big ones, just having a chance to travel and see the world. That's a great thing because, we have a lot of international programs and we'll be trying to get you out to see the world. So there's really nothing wrong with taking a gap year. It's good to have some kind of a plan for why and just put that into writing.
John, can a student apply to your school and then decide to defer their admission until the following year because they are planning to take a gap year?
Yes.
Thank you. So we are going to open it up for question and answers. Okay, so if you have a question for any of our admission reps, we want you guys to raise your hand and we'll bring the microphone over to you.
Brendan actually has a great question. What if you're a student who, for whatever reason, because of financial or maybe their grades aren't so great coming out of high school, goes to a community college for a year or two? How do you look at that in terms of their admissions later on?
This is probably probably the most appropriate question for us at Framingham State. We have hundreds of students who join us from other institutions every year. And they do that after a semester, they do that after 2 years. I had a student recently who had attended 7 colleges before coming to Framingham State. And so we value any student that demonstrates, that they're prepared to be successful at Framingham. And so starting at a community college is an excellent way to do it. Harvard actually accepted their first transfer student from Mass Bay Community College this year. So a community college is a great pathway to almost any school. And like I said, we have a couple hundred that join us every fall, a few that join us mid-year. But even we have students that start at other schools and then choose to move closer or move farther away or change their major and they need to transition. And so students do these for a variety of reasons. whether it's their proximity to home, whether it's that they've done a significant amount of dual enrollment, or there's financial reasons, or they may not meet our admissions criteria first. One of the things that we do in our denial letter at Framingham State is we refer our denied students to their local community college. And we sort of say, like, take a couple of years, take a year, and go be successful at Mount Wachusett or Quinsigamond, and then come join us, like, once you're ready. And we see some of our most exceptional students have started at community college.
Thank you.
So if you took subject testing, but you mentioned that many schools don't require subject tests, like say you did take a subject test or multiple, even if you wouldn't consider it as part of the application, would you still look at it as in terms of like merit? Or
Great question. A parent just asked this of us this earlier this week, but no, we would not look at it even if submitted, at least for Syracuse.
Yeah, and I would mirror that. The only students that we will review subject tests for are homeschool students, and we require it for English and math. Other than that, it really won't be reviewed. So I sort of discourage it because they'll charge you to send your scores to us. And I would hate for anyone to spend their money if we're not going to give it an official review.
Yeah, and I would say the only time that we really look at it is if it's sort of a significant outlier from the rest of a student's application. So if a student has significant aptitude in one area and they take a subject test, and that's what their area of interest is, then we might take a look at that as an exception for maybe not meeting some other criteria.
When you guys are looking at portfolios, I don't know if you know about that. For example, an art student or going into graphic design or animation, what are you guys looking for inside that?
I know at Northeastern, we will only accept official portfolios from students applying to the College of Arts, Media, and Design. And it is a requirement for those students. What we do is there's a link on the application to it's a company called Slide Room, which we use to process and accept portfolios. For the programs that require it, those portfolios are reviewed by the arts and science faculty. So if you're a graphic designer and we require a portfolio, it will be forwarded to the graphic design faculty. They will give it a rating and send that rating back to us. And we do that because they are really the experts on it. I get a lot of portfolios as part of it, and I love looking at them. I think they're all amazing. I'm the worst person in the world to review them because I don't know the technical pieces that program is going to require. So we have our faculty do it, and they let us know what their professional opinion is.
I actually have a follow-up question to that. Let's say you have a student who's applying and it's not a portfolio needed kind of thing, but maybe they're really passionate about art or music. Would you accept or look at, let's say they gave you a link to their YouTube video or something like that? Is that helpful in your admissions decision?
Oh, absolutely. Because again, we're looking for that really well-rounded individual. To me, I'm a big arts and music person. I really enjoy getting them. Sometimes it's an artist portfolio. Sometimes it's a YouTube link to a performance. I am a big advocate for sending those in, even if it's not a required part, because that might be a big part of who you are, and that's important for me to know.
Thank you. Any other questions here? Oh, one back there. You got him, Dave?
So personally, the majors that I've been considering are from different schools. So I've been considering like software engineering and some field of music, whether it's music production or music theory or something like that. I guess at each of your schools, is there an opportunity to be able to pursue both of those majors or pursue both of those interests?
For us, I would say yes, because we do have strong programs in both music as well as engineering. I would say over half of our students either double major or have a major minor combination.
And one thing that we've added a lot of at Northeastern are combined majors, and they are specifically designed to be across different colleges because so many applicants now have more than one interest. So many times you can come into an officially combined major track. In many cases, students work with their advisor to create one. Any major we offer can be taken as a minor, whether you're a member of that specific college or not, it doesn't matter. You can combine, you can do dual majors in anything that you want. So it's really up to you and how far you want to pursue each interest.
Dave, over there.
All right, so if I got like not so good grades and like I could get into college and like really try and like pass, would you suggest that or just go into like something average? Because like my GPA isn't that good, pretty low, and like I think that I could do pretty good just getting like an average job, but like probably could go into college too.
I think his question was, if he was an average student, should he look to go right into the workforce possibly, or still apply to college? If I heard that right.
Oh, I would definitely still consider the college route. Now, maybe you would be a stronger candidate to do community college and a transfer. That is actually what I did. I did not leave high school with a very impressive GPA. And I did 2 years at Mass Bay and then went to a full 4-year school. Actually went to Northeastern. So, it's really up to you. If you don't want to do school is not the right choice for everyone, but I would not say don't do it because you don't think your GPA makes you eligible for it. Many students come into their own in college far more than they had done in high school. And there is always the idea of you could work and come back to school if that's a better path for you.
Yeah, we see students join us from all kinds of different pathways. We have a significant veterans population at Framingham State, and we see students that begin a sort of work career and then join school a little bit later. Most of the universities you'll find will have a division that sort of fits that. So we typically call it like continuing education or evening or online. So there's a variety of ways that students can and can choose a different career path and college path. So we offer full programs in the evenings and online, as many schools do. And so some students will choose to sort of start their careers and begin in the workforce and take classes at night. And then they're finding a balance with that. But ultimately, the best thing that I can say is that college is a significant investment of time and money and energy. And so you want to make sure that you're attending college for the right reason, that it's not just because it's an expectation of your parents or your teachers, but that it's really a decision that you're making about, where you are at currently and where your career goals and academic goals are long term. So as Mark said, it might not be the right time right now, but there's always a pathway, later on. I worked at a school years ago that was dedicated entirely to adult students, and the average age of our student was 37. And it was all of our programs were offered at night and online. And it was really geared towards students who had started their career and then realized later on that they needed a degree to make the next step or to achieve a goal that they had.
And that's also a big reason for gap years. We talked about that earlier, but many students will say, I'm taking a gap year because I want to work, whether they are raising money or they just want the experience. So it's really not a bad path.
So I have 2 questions. The first question is, if you have someone that you want as your recommender that's outside of the school environment, would that be a letter of recommendation that you would accept? And the second, if you were offered a financial aid or merit scholarship package from a similarly competitive school, would you be willing to compare and to potentially up what you had offered the student compared to what they had been offered at another school?
I think with the financial piece, the school that I last worked for, we certainly took and compared financial aid packages. So we encourage students to submit them. At Syracuse, we don't. I mean, we feel we provide a strong financial aid package from the beginning. Students are more than welcome to talk to us and appeal the process, but at the same time, it's not something that we're going to encourage the comparisons of it. And then what was the first part?
Oh, the letters of recommendation.
Yeah, you talked about that earlier.
Yeah, so we would, at least at Framingham State, your letters of recommendation we want them from a guidance counselor and then somebody academically, but if you have, valuable experience and a letter from a member of your community or someone that you've worked for or volunteered with, we consider those just as valuable. We want to give we are not getting to meet every single one of you personally, so any insight that you can give us to your skill set, your lives, your character, outside of what we see on paper, it really, gives us a good idea of who you are as a student and who you are as a person, as we consider welcoming you to our campus.
And I would say the same thing, I'm sorry, just around recommendations. If you have volunteered somewhere, if you have had a job where you've really contributed to, those recommendations are completely valid and important. And then just quickly on scholarships, we're very similar to Syracuse, that we would not match another scholarship.
So I think our bell is going to ring soon, so I want you guys to give a good round of applause for our...
Thank you.